I've never had more fun at concerts, and I've never had more fun making a fool out of myself. I've never had more fun singing Backstreet Boys on a boat in Lake Powell with ex-gangbangers and prostitutes than I do in recovery. You know, that's what we do.
It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host, O.
On episode 35 of the Share Podcast, we have Arielle Spanvill joining us today, who goes from oxytocin, crystal meth in jail to recovery and the White House. You don't want to miss this episode. But first, a message from our sponsor. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. And if you're looking for more than just one recovery-related podcast, I've got two for you. The Recovery Elevator and That Sober Guy. On Mondays, you have Paul Churchill with the Recovery Elevator podcast. On Tuesdays, you have me, O, with the Share podcast. And on Fridays, you have Shane Raymer with the That Sober Guy podcast. Tune in every week and add us to your recovery portfolio. HP, baby. And after this interview, if you enjoyed listening to the Share podcast, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. This will ensure we get ranked well on these networks, and that means more people will easily find the Share podcast. This is the best way to show your support and help us grow. You can also find the Share podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, YouTube. Go to any one of your favorite social networks and type in the Share Podcast. Remember to spell share, S-H-A-I-R, and the Share Podcast will come right up. So make sure to follow us on all of your favorite social networks. And finally, if you would like to make a donation to the Share Podcast, you can do so using PayPal. The entire amount of your donation will go towards maintaining and growing the show. On the top right corner of the website, you'll see a donate button. Just click on it, and this will take you to the page where you can make your donation. By donating only $5 a month, you can help support, maintain, and grow the show. Thanks again for helping the Share Podcast become a huge success. Now back to the show. Hi, Arielle. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, O, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. I'm excited to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
Excellent. I'm feeling great, excited to be part of your show, and looking forward to it.
Excellent. So let's get started. So Arielle, let's dive right in. Tell us about how your life is today, what you do for a living. Take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery.
Yeah. So currently I live in beautiful San Diego, California.
Awesome.
I know. I lucked out on this one. I work for an agency called Transforming Youth Recovery. And our founder and CEO pledged $10,000 grants to four-year institutions to build and develop collegiate recovery programs. So a sober, safe place for people in recovery to be able to go to school. Pretty cool deal. And I get to help develop these collegiate recovery programs across the nation. So our work hours are a little crazy. So I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning, at the office by 7, work till 3:30, and then usually hit the beach.
Which sounds
rough.
Which
is great. I know.
Oh my God. I was waiting for 15-hour days.
No, I mean, we can make it worse. I get to travel across the nation and go to conferences, talk about recovery, talk about collegiate recovery. So it's pretty tough, but someone's got to do it.
I absolutely love it. And you know what? I'm going to stop you for a second, Arielle, because this is why I asked this particular question, because I want everyone that's listening, especially the newcomers, to hear stories about people that are absolutely having just a blast, living their lives. And it's only because of recovery that they have these lives. And on top of that, you get to like live recovery daily. So it's just awesome. I love it.
Thank you. I am very blessed, and my higher power has a very crazy sense of humor. which I just love. It's just madness. It's a trip.
Well, I'm going to let you unleash a little bit more about that story later. But first, I want to find out how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs. And more importantly, how did they make you feel?
So the first time I ever used drugs, I started kind of backwards. The first thing I ever did was the cough medicine with codeine in it.
And how old were you?
I was 12.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. 12 years old, going through a lot of trauma, and discovered this cough medicine with the codeine in it and just loved it. I mean, the spins, being dizzy, not feeling anything was awesome. And I used to like drink a mouthful and then see how long I could stay awake.
Oh, wow. This was at 12 years old.
12 years old.
And how did that make you feel?
Well, I didn't really think there was anything wrong with it. I just thought it was awesome. I had... Yeah, like I had no idea what I was doing was like going to open this door to this whole other world.
Gotcha. And what is your clean date or sobriety? What's your sobriety date and how much time do you have?
My sobriety date is January 26, 2009. So I have a little over 6 years, closer to 7 years sober.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Arielle, you are completely warmed up. So it's time for me to turn this show over to you. It is time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life when you hit rock bottom, and finally, your journey into recovery into today. So, Arielle, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's see. I was born in Provo, Utah, and I was adopted at about 3 days old. My mother... She's from Provo, but she was living in New York at the time, and she was a professor at Fordham University. And my father was an entrepreneur, and I have no idea what he was doing at the time, but making a ton of money because we lived very, we lived very well in Manhattan. So I was whisked away, grew up in Manhattan, New York, well, until I was 5. Had a great childhood. I mean, like anything I could want, was always dressed up in like princess costumes or ballet costumes. I had 2 adorable little sisters who came along later. All 3 of us are adopted and we got along really well. I loved my sisters very much. And when I was around 5, we ended up moving back to Provo, Utah. My mom got a job at BYU, the Brigham Young University, as the director of the Women's Research Institute, and my father started to become really, really sick. And this is kind of when everything kind of shifted up like abruptly. He started getting really sick, and that blissful childhood kind of turned into going to the hospital all the time. Between my father and my mother's parents and my grandparents, we were just always in the hospital. They were getting old and having surgeries and breaking hips and strokes and all those horrible things. And,
right.
And then my father, And then my father was getting sick and having kidneys removed and heart attacks. And it wasn't uncommon to wake up the next day and being like, "Where's Dad?" And Mom's like, "Oh, he's in the hospital again. Like, you didn't hear the fire trucks?" And I said, "No." Like, I would just sleep kind of through all of that.
Did he have something in particular?
Well, the doctors didn't really know what was happening to him, which was part of the problem. He did have cancer on top of everything else, and that's kind of the easiest way to explain it.
Right. So
his body started turning against him. When my parents got married, he was 6'2", and when he finally ended up passing away when I was 12, he was 5'2". And I think his whole spine collapsed, like his ribs were barreled out. He was on pain medication all the time, and I watched my father die pretty much, and which was terrible because I was the oldest. I was Daddy's little girl. He actually would teach me about football and what positions were what and how to catch a ball and play chess with me and build radios and whatever. So he was really my best friend. And since he was always home and my mom was always at work, like we got to be really close. And that's kind of the other piece of this is that my mom was kind of right in the thick of her career with being a professor. So doing research and publishing research, and because that was her thing. She's a research psychologist. So she was always doing that, and Dad was sick. And I was just kind of like left I was left. I had my 2 little sisters, and we would just we were always left at school really late. Like, I keep having these weird memories of like always being the last ones at school, always being the last one picked up from ballet, and like just kind of sitting around waiting for my mom all the time. So when I was 12, actually it was 5 days before Thanksgiving, my father ended up passing away. It was awful, and I hate Thanksgiving, and I still hate Thanksgiving today. And then like that light that I kind of had as a kid went away. I became a very angry, depressed, and I think more angry. And that anger kind of stuck around with me for a long time. I felt like an outcast at school. The same year I was diagnosed with dyslexia. So I felt very different from my classmates. Like, my best friend when I was growing up, she was the smart one. Like, she always got A's and always got 100 and always was like the shining example. And I just kind of turned into this like really angry, mopey, depressed teenager, but like really angry and mopey and depressed.
Yeah.
I started acting out in school, started getting in trouble. But here's the funny thing. Like, I would get in trouble and they would be like, you need to go to detention. And I wouldn't go to detention and I would never get in trouble again. So I kind of learned that there's no consequences to my actions, like, through all of this. So I would mouth off, and I went to private school, so you had to wear uniforms, and I would try to get away with the shoes that maybe weren't uniform or the pants that maybe weren't uniform, all to try to get my mother's attention as she's trying to raise 3 girls and her husband's gone and she's in the middle of her career. So like oppositional defiant, that stuff really started coming out when I was little, or when I was, a teenager. And then this is when, so my sisters and I we would get sick. You get sick in the winters in Utah because it's freezing cold outside. And our doctors would prescribe us the cough medicine with codeine in it, and huge bottles of it too. And I don't know why. Like, I saw them a couple years later and they're like, now these little teeny bottles. I'm like, no. I swear they were like liter-sized bottles of this cough medicine. And of course we never used all of it. And I remember taking the recommended dose and being, oh, this is really nice. I like this feeling. I'm going to drink a mouthful. Ooh. I don't know why. I just had this idea. I guess it's maybe like if a little bit makes me feel good, like a lot's going to make me feel even better. And so I would drink more. And eventually the stash would run out, and my mom would always be like, where did all the cough medicine go? And I'm like, I don't know, Mom. Like, who knows? Somebody maybe drink it. I don't know. And Mom would just kind of, I don't know if she knew or if she didn't want to know, but she would let it slide. I would buy pills from friends. My friend who I used to buy pills from actually just got sober, and he's living in Las Vegas, just got out of treatment, and I get to talk to him about recovery, which is pretty cool. Everything's kind of come full circle. But I used to buy pills from him when I was in like 7th, 8th grade. And I don't even think he knew what he was doing. And I don't even think I really knew what I was doing. But I did it anyway because I figured out that like the sticker on the pill bottle said may cause drowsiness or dizziness. Uh-huh. That's what I wanted.
You actually looked for it?
Yeah. Anything that said would cause drowsiness or dizziness, that's what I wanted. Because that would make me feel good. And that anger would kind of go away for a while. And I could just kind of zone out, and I wouldn't need to feel everything that was going on. And I didn't really care what other people thought about me, which was probably the biggest relief.
What kind of pills were you buying?
They were Lortabs. I don't know if they were 5s or 7.5s. I don't remember. But I knew that they were Lortabs, little yummy little pills. Yeah.
Dude, this is what I love about, doing these shows. I've never even heard of this stuff. Is it?
Really?
Is it an upper? Is it a downer? What is it?
It's a downer. So it's a opioid.
Got it. Okay, yeah. That's all you needed to tell me.
Yeah. It's an opioid, little pain pill that they give out.
So you were just looking to disconnect every chance you could.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Every chance I could. I was a ballerina when I was a teenager, and I would even use that. Like, if I was at ballet, then I wasn't at home. I didn't have to deal with what was going on at home. I didn't have to deal with my feelings.
Right.
And even though it wasn't as good as the Lortab or the cough medicine, like, at least I wasn't home and I wasn't in my body and I wasn't really thinking, because in ballet, there's so many things you have to concentrate on. It's impossible to think about anything else.
Yep.
Then I started working at a movie theater, and I met all these new boys, because along with drugs, I like men. Mm-hmm. They are definitely in the top 2. Well, maybe 3, like drugs, alcohol, and men. Like, I'm done. So I met all these great boys, right? And they were kind of the hard asses from whatever schools they were going to. So I started hanging out with this one dude, and by hanging out with him, I met this other dude who ended up becoming a longtime boyfriend. But we'd smoke weed. So I was about 17 when I started smoking weed. Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it, except for the eating part. That kind of got to be a lot.
The munchies.
The munchies. Really a lot of munchies. And I got high like the first time I smoked weed. A lot of people say you don't get high, but I was pretty baked. Like I ate my friend's entire kitchen, I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
yeah. I was
ditto.
like, I'm so hungry. And I have no idea how I graduated high school. Like when I was, because I was constantly in trouble. I don't even think I did any homework. I would go to class, but I was baked the whole time. Somehow they let me graduate though, which was phenomenal. And then entrance into the college world where I move out of my mother's house and I go live in these BYU approved apartments and I find myself a best friend who's down for smoking weed too. And the rest of my roommates are so naive. They have no idea what's going on as we're like getting baked in our room on the other side of the apartment. And we always had beer and we always had boys, and you're not allowed to have any of that in BYU approved housing. And I just didn't care.
Of course.
No, I was like, whatever, like, you don't know who I am and I'm going to go do this. And once again, like I never got in trouble for any of this stuff. I don't really know how, but I didn't. That's when things kind of kicked up like another notch. If you can be kicked up from opiates to smoking weed and drinking, I don't know. But you know, I didn't have like mom over my shoulder, and I always knew where the party was in Utah County. I have no idea how I would have this information, but I always knew where the party was, and I'd always drag my friends with me. And this is when things started getting a little scary, when I started drinking regularly. As I look back on it now with a sober, clear mind, I'm like, oh my God, I was a blackout drinker from the beginning.
Yep. Blackout
drinker. I have these like little snapshots of memories, because there's a lot of memories I'm sure are either repressed or I don't remember. But I have these snapshots of like crawling out of a window in a toga with some dude behind me.
I'm totally picturing it though.
My hair was cut in a faux hawk. And I'm crawling out of this. I have no idea why I'm crawling out of this. I'm in a cabin up in this beautiful part of Utah County. I have no idea how I know about this party. And I'm in a toga crawling out of a window. Like, it's bizarre. A couple years later, I have another memory. I was coming to in the backseat of my car with my boyfriend driving at the time. And 2 other girls are in the car. And once again, I'm in a toga in the car.
You love those toga parties, huh?
I did. No one else was in a toga. It was just me.
It's a Will Ferrell moment, basically.
Yeah. Lots of getting naked and streaking and just that girl.
Yeah, it's an absolute Will Ferrell moment. Yeah, for sure. We're all
going
streaking. Who's everybody?
One's like, all right, Arielle, you do that. Just wreckage and debauchery just everywhere. I was totally that girl that would like dance, like fall over and get naked. And yeah, it's a miracle I'm still alive. So college was really fun. I was about to
say college sounded like a blast. Like, oh my God, fucking love it.
Right? And the first semester I did really well. I got like A's and B's. Like I could still kind of keep it together. I went to class, or I would like go to class and leave early. So I still got the attendance points. I did well. I made it on the dean's list. I was really proud of myself. Second semester, still okay. Not dean's list, but not like a complete, disaster. And
but it's amazing how you made the dean's list. You're getting A's and B's and you're partying like an absolute rock star.
No, but it was very short-lived. So
okay.
In one Christmas break, I was working at a car dealership up in Salt Lake. And I had this brand new car. It was a 2005 WRX, and she was beautiful. She was bright red, right? It's like my dream car. Mm-hmm. Going to school, drinking and partying whenever I want, still kind of holding it together. Everything's okay. Well, at this car dealership, there's this little guy Oh, and I say little because he's like my same height, and to me that's little. And he just got out of prison.
Ooh.
And he was super cute, and he was living in a halfway house. And I was like, this is the one you bring home to mom because he's going places.
Dude.
So we start hanging out, and we start drinking, and we're smoking weed, and everything's good. And then he goes, hey, have you ever had an oxytocin, which is another opioid? And I'm like, no. He's like, here, you should have some. And so I take this oxycontin 80, which is like the most powerful one. And I have no idea how to take it. So I like just swallow it because that's what I'm used to doing. And I am gone. I'm nodding off at my desk. Like I can't keep it together. I can't answer the phone. I'm slurring my words. And I'm like, this guy's great. He buys any dude who's gonna like supply me with drugs, like I am all over it. Like this is the best arrangement ever. Yep. So January rolls around. I'm still going to class for like 3 weeks, and I have tickets to a concert because I love going to concerts. And I'm like, hey, you should come with me to this show and grab some party favors. And he's like, all right, I'm on it. So I go home and I get ready, you know, all cute, rock star, and I drive up to go get him because he can't drive because he's on probation or parole or whatever. And no big deal.
Yeah.
And I go walk into his room because he's still living with his mom. And he's got some lines on his like dresser. He's like, here, do one of these. I'm like, what is it? He's like, don't worry about it. Just do it. And I'm like, okay. Because I do it first and ask questions later. So I think I did like 2 lines and go to the show. And I just have this amazing time. Like I am dancing like nobody's watching, singing along. Like my voice is like in perfect harmony with the singer. And after the show, I take him home and I head back home and I cannot sleep.
Oh, you did some blow.
Oh, no. It was methamphetamine. Oh, yeah. And like the next day I had class. Well, okay. Well, first of all, I call him and I'm like, hey, I need some more of whatever you gave me because it's amazing. Because the first time I did meth, it was this absolutely euphoric feeling. I am unstoppable and I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life because I feel so amazing. So we do some more meth that night. I go to class the next day, and the first class I have is ballet. I was still in my ballet stuff at this time. And I go to ballet high on meth, and it was phenomenal. I mean, my balance, I've never balanced so well in my life. I've never lifted my legs so high in my life. I've never been so flexible. It was amazing. Now, the day after that, when I had come down a little bit, I felt like an 80-year-old woman because I couldn't move. I had totally overdone it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple weeks later in that semester, I ended up withdrawing because I was 100% just on the methamphetamine train and going hard. So a lot of shame involved with that, but I just take my pipe and start smoking and I forget about it. I forget that I have just withdrew from school due to mental health reasons, I believe it was. And I ended up moving in with this guy because that's the natural next step to move in with him. Yeah. And we're living in Draper, Utah, which is in between Utah County and Salt Lake County. And I just was turned into this huge meth head and did it hard for like 3 years. In the course of my methamphetamine use, there was a lot of abuse and I got pregnant and was just beside myself. When things were abusive, obviously he always won. But when I got pregnant, like I kicked him in the face and that was awesome. I was really proud of myself for that one.
Oh my God.
I was like, this is your fault. Boom. And he didn't come back at me that time, which was nice. So I chalked that one up to a win on my side.
Dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And being pregnant and being strung out on meth is far and away one of the most darkest times of my life. No, it is. It's the most dark time of my life because I didn't stop using when I was pregnant. I did not want to have this baby. I absolutely did not want him and his crazy mom involved with this child. And I was really hoping that if I kept doing drugs, I'd have a miscarriage or something would happen and this really would not go through. But that didn't happen. And actually, she was born in May. I don't know, she's 9 years old, so whatever that is. When there's like a lot of trauma surrounding dates, I have a hard time remembering when it is. But I know it was May. It was like the week of Mother's Day, or Mother's Day week. And she was born just fine. And everything went as well as it could have, which is remarkable considering I was like using during this entire thing.
So the baby, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Wow,
no,
that is... Well, I'm always going to be at this point in the story going, that's an absolute higher power God moment. You know,
for sure.
that kid should have been born strung out on meth.
Yeah, or like some sort of
deformity
maybe,
or something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it was like newborn babies can be a little creepy, but she was so cute when she was born.
Aww.
And she was darling. And even today, right now, like it seems like she's like normal. Like there's no indications of anything that's going on.
So you kept her?
No, I actually gave her up for adoption.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew I was in no place to be a mother, and I definitely wasn't done running and gunning yet, and I did not want him involved and his family. So by some miraculous higher power moment, I guess, again, he terminated his rights as her father. We went to the judge and I signed mine away and he signed his away. And so it was clean and that was it. It was supposed to be a closed adoption, but close friends of the family, or I had a lawyer contact them because they had been trying to have kids forever and it never worked. And so I was like, I would love them to be the parents for my daughter. And anyways, they figured out it was me somehow. I don't know. And I don't really want to know how they figured out it was me. And they confronted me about it. And I told them, like, yes, like I am the mother of your child or whatever. So let's not tell her who I am. Let's just wait until she wants to know. So, and she's been involved in like major milestones in my life, you know, coming to events or celebrations, and she's kind of always been there as, you know, a good friend of the family, which is great. So
she still doesn't know that you're her mother?
No.
Wow.
Nope.
And you have a good relationship with her parents?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dude,
yeah,
that's
I do.
Awesome. That is so awesome.
It is. I mean, it really worked out as well as I could have hoped, because to have her, you know, at my graduation is awesome. And I get to hold her and play with her a little bit and talk to her and hang out with her. But it's, you know, it's cool and it's copacetic. And I am so glad that she's a princess, you know, that she has whatever she wants. Like she's totally taken care of. She doesn't have to worry about, you know, whatever I'm doing or come through my drug addiction with me when she was little. Like she's very well taken care of, which is all that matters to me in the long run.
Well, she's living the life that you led when you were a child.
Yeah, she does. She dresses up and she's got, you know, stuffed animals and dolls and like a beautiful princess bed, and it's great. I could not be more happy with her and the way things are going. It can be hard sometimes, but for the most part, I know I made the right decision.
No question about it.
So he signed away his rights. I signed away mine. And I think it was like 18 months later, he ended up dying of an overdose.
No.
Suicide overdose. Uh-huh. Yeah.
What a story. Oh my God.
Like my life is nothing short of an adventure. It's absolutely crazy. So he dies, which was just really weird for me to experience. I didn't really know how to, because I'd never known anyone to die from an overdose or really what an overdose even was until that happened. And that kind of like set this thing in motion for me. I had no idea, right? So the time that he died, I was also involved in a couple of court cases because I'm a thief and I got caught a couple times. And
what kind of theft?
Just retail theft.
Okay.
I mean, nothing grandiose at all. But I had this judge who would not lay off of me. Like she was crazy. And looking back, she saved my life. But at the time, like I really wasn't happy with her and I really didn't like her. So she sends me to go do this assessment up at the University of Utah Hospital. And I'm introduced to two men who would both become my therapist much later in life. So they do this assessment and I do like the MMPI, which tells if you're lying and like all this other stuff. And they give this, you know, recommendation that I probably need some serious help. And the therapist that I'm seeing isn't really doing her job. And like Steve, my therapist, worked very closely with the judge. And so they were trying to figure out what to do with me. And I walked into her courtroom and then I'm just high on heroin. At this point in time, I had transitioned back to heroin off of the meth. And I'm high on heroin, and I walk into her courtroom, and I'm telling her I'm clean. And she sends me off to go UA. And the night before, I had done heroin, cocaine, and drank. And I come back and I'm totally dirty, right? Just dirty. And like I got, the heroin chic eyes going on. And she takes one look at me and she goes, "I'm sending you to jail." She's like, "I can't stop you. No one else can stop you. You owe your mother and your lawyer an apology, and you're doing 90 days in Salt Lake Community Jail."
Ooh.
Or Salt Lake County Jail. And I was flabbergasted. I did not think for 1 minute she would send me to jail. Like, the honest to God thought that I had was, I'm too pretty to go to jail.
Dude,
yep.
I love the addict thinking.
I know, right? Just delusional and out of control. And my face would like puff up when I was on heroin too. I mean, I looked like Stewie Griffin, and I just have like those like heroin eyes. And I'm telling her I'm clean, and I tell her I'll get sober when I'm getting ready, and mouthing off to the judge. And it was quite the show. So off I go to Salt Lake County Jail, where I detoxed in jail, which was a lot of fun. Met a lot of really cool women. Ended up not becoming friends with them because as they were like booking me into jail, I kind of was able to connect the dots of how I got to where I was, and kind of started thinking like, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. It didn't really stick. So I'm in jail, and I'm trying to get out on ankle monitor, where I would sleep. You don't have to stay in jail. You're still considered a prisoner, and you have to wear that thing around your ankle.
Right. Ankle bracelet.
Yeah, the ankle bracelet. And I'm trying to get out on ankle monitor and like stay with my cousin, and I'd come to the jail and like clean or do community service or whatever. And then you end up getting out early, and I don't know, it seemed like a really good idea. So I get out on ankle monitor, and I'm super excited, and I have like $20 that are on my books, and they give you a check when you leave the jail if you have money on your books. So I go down to the Maverick that's down the street, because they will cash the jail checks, and I buy a pack of cigarettes, and I have my cell phone, and I call my drug dealer, and I say, "Hey, I've been in jail. Come meet me." And he's like, "Oh, baby, like, where have you been? We miss you, blah, blah, blah." I get hooked up, and I go to my cousin's house, where she has a plethora of pills. Oh. And I take all of them, take all of her pills, meeting my dealer, getting high in the jail parking lot before I have to report to work. I mean, they did drug test us, but I got through like 2 weeks without being drug tested, so I really wasn't worried about it. I get drug tested once, and they're like, "You're dirty." And I'm like, "Oh, I hurt my back doing sandbags yesterday, and my cousin gave me a pill, and I didn't know what it was, and it must have been Lortab, and now I'm dirty." And they're like, okay, this is awesome.
Yep.
So I keep getting high, get drug tested again, another terrible excuse. And they're like, "All right, okay, don't let it happen again. You're fine. Go have a good day." Okay, I will go have a good day. I will go get high as soon as I'm done with work. So go to work, get drug tested again, dirty. This time they're not having it. They put the handcuffs right on me right there and like escort me into the back room. And they're like, "You can call whoever you need to call." I'm like, "Mom, I'm going back to jail." She's like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And it's like, I got high. And as I'm like getting off the phone, one of the officers is like, "Why didn't you tell us you had a drug problem? We could have helped you." I'm like, that seems really counterintuitive for me to tell a police officer that I have a drug problem. I'm not going to do that. That sounds ridiculous. Back in jail, detoxing again. And after I get through the detox, and my head starts to clear out. I was in a cell by myself for like a week. And after I got through the detox, I started pacing. I had so much anxiety, like I could not sit still. So I'm like pacing back and forth in my cell. And I'm like trying to figure out like what happened. And I have two thoughts that come to my mind. The first thought was, maybe normal people don't get high in the jail parking lot. That was my first thought. And my second thought was I saw this girl who had been in jail with me 2 months earlier, and it hit me. I'm like, oh, this is like what you do. Like you go to jail, and I understand that this is a lot of people's stories, but this isn't my story. Like you go to jail, you get in trouble, or you get out, and you get in trouble again, you come back, and you kind of do this in and out revolving thing. And with the mixture of those two thoughts, I was like, I think I need help. Like, I think I have a problem and I never want to come back to jail again. And if that means that I can't do drugs or drink anymore, that's fine. I can't do this anymore. And so I wrote my mother a letter because I couldn't use the phone. And I said, I think I need some help. And she immediately started looking for treatment programs for me to go to. Because even though my mom and I had a really weird, codependent relationship, and she never got me in trouble, and she probably should have, hopefully to help me hit my bottom sooner. Mm-hmm. The one thing she did say was, when you need help, I'll help you.
Right.
So I knew there was this arm waiting to help me when I was ready. And I did not think I was going to be ready ever. So my mom's like, hey, I found a couple treatment centers. I was going to get released soon. And she's like, I think we should go talk to Steve, who's at the university hospital, and get his opinion. I'm like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Well, on January 21st, 2009, which was also President Obama's inauguration date, I was let out of jail. And this date is actually very important. And it comes back around full circle later. So I get out of jail and I'm like, I'm so glad to be an American. It's a great day. I'm out of jail. Obama's, in office and everything's going to be great. And I get out and I get on the Vivitrol, which is it was a shot that they put in you that was an opiate blocker. So the opiates can't attach to the neurotransmitters.
Right.
So you can't get high. So I get on Vivitrol, but the roundabout way from Vivitrol is cocaine and Xanax. So you can still get high off of those. So I convinced my doctor that I was having panic attacks since I'd been out of jail and I didn't know how to handle life. And so he gives me a prescription of Klonopin, and I take it all in 2 days. Just right back on it, because I have no tools. I don't know how to get sober. And what I thought of treatment was a 28-day vacation, and I'd be magically cured and everything was going to be okay and I could drink normally, right? Or use drugs like a lady or whatever. So we go see Steve Shepard up at the University of Utah Hospital, and he goes, where have you been looking for treatment? I'm like, Cirque Lodge, which is this really bougie treatment center where all a lot of the stars go, and Journey, which is another bougie treatment center. And he goes, well, have you ever thought of this little place called The Haven? And I was like, oh no, this is where I should go to treatment. I kind of got that feeling in my gut that this is where I should go. And I said, no, I haven't heard of The Haven. He's like, well, go check it out. I'll let them know you're coming. So I go down to The Haven and I meet the staff, and it's this itsy bitsy house on South Temple in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a county funded treatment center, which also has private pay beds. And a week later, actually on my birthday, January 27th, 2009, I'm checking myself into treatment. And of course, the night before I go in, I'm shooting up cocaine and hanging out with all the boys and partying and doing all this stuff. And then walking into treatment the next day, you're supposed to have 5 days sober. And there was no way I could do that. So I just lied and told them, oh yeah, I totally have 5 days sober. So
you bang some coke right before you go in. Well, there's no way to deny that you just did that. They give you a UA when you walked in the next day?
No. So the Haven is it's a different kind of treatment center that you kind of walk in with this level of trust. They don't search your bags. They don't UA you. You just walk in with this level of trust, right? And you're voted in and you're voted out, or you can be voted out. So I was voted in by the group and started treatment. And the Haven is a modified therapeutic community. So the group kind of runs everything. And it's very intensive. It was very confrontational when I was there. So a lot of what the fuck do you think you're doing? And a lot of why don't we put a goddamn stripper pole in the group room because you're shaking your ass around here? And a lot of that kind of treatment, that kind of old school treatment.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. And we had assertiveness where you pull up 2 chairs and you sit down and confront the person who did something to piss you off. And it got really brutal in there sometimes. And it was awesome. And I just loved it. And I fell in love with AA. I felt like I finally belonged. I felt like I finally met people who understood me, because it was 12-step based. It was a 12-step based program. And, there was all these alumni that would hang out, and they had sober living. Well, it was called transitional housing. So they had transitional housing. And so I got to meet the people that came before me who were in my age group and having fun in recovery, going bowling. Who goes bowling? These people went bowling and it was totally fun. And I loved it. So I worked on the death of my father while I was in treatment. And here's the hilarious part. So we have doctors, right? These two doctors came in from the university, and it was Steve, like, who had done my assessment, and his intern, who had also worked on like my assessment too, who knew all of my secrets. They knew them all, and they would bring them up in group, and I would just glare at them, and it was terrible. So I got to work on myself a lot. And the two things I left with when I left treatment was a sponsor and a boyfriend, because that's what you do.
So again, the recovery romance. You met the man of your dreams in rehab.
I did. Well, he was living in transitional living, but he was 6 months sober, and I had 60 days when I got kicked out. And here's the best part. I ended up marrying him in recovery.
So how much time did you have when you married this guy?
18 months.
Well, at least you had a little time.
Yeah. Not enough. But I had
No, I wouldn't say that it is. You know, I got married when I had 10 years. You know? So it's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, there was a lot. Oh my goodness. Like, the wedding was beautiful. My dress, like, everything was so perfect except for the guy. And here's the cool thing, right? Like, we got married, we got divorced, or annulled. It was annulled because it was only 6 months. And we tore each other apart socially and just talked a lot of shit. But at the end of the day, we're both still sober and we're friends now. And that is like 100% a gift of being sober.
Yes.
Yeah. And all those relationships that were ruined while we were like talking shit, those have all been repaired too. So all the damage that happened, and there was a lot with that situation, it's all been repaired. Amends have been made. It's just remarkable that working the steps and actually practicing the principles in all of our affairs, like, it really does work. I thought everybody was full of shit for so long. And once I started causing wreckage in recovery and having to make amends and having people make amends to me, I really saw the full circle and the power that the steps have in people's lives. And that was a pretty remarkable experience. And and my ex-husband and I just recently made amends to each other. It was actually in May, just a couple of months ago. And yes, it took that long. And most of that was me having to do a lot of work on myself through the steps and through a lot of intensive therapy to be able to sit down with him and look at him face to face and say, like, this is what I did X, Y, and Z, and how can I make it up to you? And for him to do the same thing. It's amazing. He lives in Salt Lake and I live here, so it's not like we're going to run into each other. But if we ever did, like, it's not going to be awkward.
But the fellowship is the fellowship. And it's another reason why they tell you, for lack of a better term, don't shit where you eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, early in recovery, when things like that happen, you might say, well, I'm not going to that meeting anymore. And I'm not dealing with those people anymore. And then all of a sudden it becomes a challenge even to just be in recovery because of that situation. And having the relationship that you have now, again, is only because you made the decision to work your program.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We used to joke and said, I got the haven in the divorce because I stayed around and he graciously ducked out and allowed me to have that. And he had to go find recovery and meetings and all that stuff somewhere else, which is fine. But now everything's cool and he can go back to the haven, and he actually has. So that's fantastic. But yeah, and I see that tearing people apart all the time. Like, oh, we broke up, I'm not going to go there. And then next thing you know, they're back out. And that's really sad. Man, I tell you, it takes a lot to be able to go to those meetings where, like, his friends are going to be there and just say, like, I'm not going to engage and I'm just here for me to hopefully learn something from everybody who shares. It takes a lot to be able to do that. It's a lot of courage. There's no way I would have been able to get through, like, the emotional upheaval that was that divorce or annulment or whatever you want to call it, without my friends, without my sponsor, without my therapist, because my therapist is a huge part in my story, and without, like, my family, whose, like, relationships were all repaired through this thing of recovery. So even though this really heartbreaking thing happened, there was a lot of good that came from it. So here's the other thing about relationships, right? So I was in a relationship right out of the gate. got married and divorced and then into another relationship right away because I am a codependent as much as I am an alcoholic. And it took me, you know how they talk about that psychic change?
Yes.
It took me 3 years to have that psychic change. Even though I was sober, and I wouldn't even say, I don't know, maybe I was dry, I don't know, but I was still a very angry person inside. I had worked the steps multiple times. I had sponsees, but I still wasn't getting that relief. And it's my theory that relationships can really kind of blur that getting clear stage that's supposed to happen at some point in time. And I think because I was in these relationships that really weren't, healthy or quote unquote good, and I kind of stayed in this miserable state. And it wasn't until I broke up with my boyfriend that I had after I got married that I had to really, the rubber was meeting the road, and it was either jump into the fellowship in AA again, because my boyfriend, the one that I came after, he was a normie and he would drink. I've never relapsed. I've been sober this entire time without anything, but I kind of was getting close with this guy because he would drink all the time. So I jumped back in the fellowship, jumped back in with the Haven, and had the most awesome summer of my life. I think it was the summer of 2012. It was amazing. And I had all these great friends and we lived the dream, and it was just a party. It was a sober party. We partied sober all day, every day. And it was amazing. Dance parties and going to Moab and going to Lake Powell and just cutting loose and having a good time. And we went to concerts and we went to bonfires and we did everything you could do, just having a ball. And it was great. And then, through the process of all this, when I got sober, my counselor that I had in treatment was phenomenal. And she's actually my best friend today. And I wanted to do what she did. I wanted to be a counselor. So I started going to school for social work. And I had to start back at community college because after dropping out one semester and going to jail in the middle of one semester, that kind of sets you back a little bit. So I started at Salt Lake Community College. And then I went to the University of Utah for my undergraduate. And then just this last May, I graduated with my Master's of Social Work from the University of Utah.
Beautiful.
So,
wow. Yeah. I love it.
It is crazy. I can't believe, I always wanted to go to college, but I never really thought I'd be able to do it. I was terrified. I'd sit in my therapist's office, and he had a PhD, so he totally understood how awful and wonderful school is at the same time. So we really bonded over that. But yeah, school was a trip. And when I was at Salt Lake Community College, there was no other people in recovery that I was with. Even in my fellowship, no one else was going to school. So I was kind of in this weird place of no, guys, I have to do homework. I can't go out and play, which kind of sucked. I kind of felt a little alienated, but it happens. And now everybody goes to school and they're like, oh my gosh, school's terrible. I'm like, I know. Remember when I couldn't go out to play because I had homework? Now you get it. But cool. If you need any help, let me know. So when I got to my bachelor's, my counselor, who was my sponsor, now my best friend, we were both going to school for social work, and our educational paths linked up and we started going to school together. So it was me and my bestie, the only two people in recovery, in a school of social work, which seems really weird because I thought everybody got sober and wanted to be a social worker. So I got to graduate from college and grad school with my best friend, and she was my sponsor for 4 years. So our relationship is very close, and she has been my rock. She's been there since day one of my sobriety, and we have walked this crazy, beautiful journey together. And she still works at the treatment center. She still works at the Haven. And I'm out here, doing my gig out here, and we talk all the time, and she gets me, and she's seen every dark corner of my life, and I've seen pretty much every dark corner of her life, and we've gone on crazy adventures together.
You have fun. That's what it's all about. Recovery is about having fun.
Exactly. And I've never had more fun at concerts, and I've never had more fun making a fool out of myself. I've never had more fun singing Backstreet Boys on a boat in Lake Powell with ex-gangbangers and prostitutes than I do in recovery. That's what we do. So there's one piece of the story of how I got to San Diego, which is far and away the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. All that other stuff was really tragic, and some of it's really funny, but this story is out of control. So I was an intern in Washington, D.C. about 1.5 years ago, and at SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. So I got to learn about like where all the grants come from and whatnot. From that experience, I was recruited to run a brass tacks grant in Salt Lake City. And brass tacks is like bringing recovery supports to scale. And I don't remember what TACS stands for, but I got to educate the recovery community in Salt Lake about healthcare and why it's important for people who are in recovery to have healthcare, because we tend to have some health problems and healthcare is a good thing. So I'm in grad school. I'm just finishing up my first semester of grad school. I have this awesome professor and we're sitting in class and my phone rings and I go outside to answer it because I know she doesn't care if I answer my phone. It's a girl that I work with and she's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just in school. Like, what's going on?" She's like, "I just got a call from the White House and they need your bio."
Oh,
yeah.
Whoa.
Right?
Incredible.
I'm like, "What?" Like, "What do you mean the White House needs my bio?" She's like, "Well, I guess they're planning on doing some event in January and your name came up and they want your bio." I said, "Can you help me write it?" Because she's like she's a journalist. She's a phenomenal writer. She's like, "Write something up and send it to me." So I go back into my class and I grab my professor and I'm like, "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but the White House needs my bio." And she's like, "What?" She's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but can I go work on that?" And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Wow.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
So I know. I mean, just crazy. So I write my bio and I send it to Shannon, who like cleans it up and gets it looking really good. And it goes off to the White House. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to think of this, but I guess I'm just going to like throw it up to HP and hopefully he knows what he's doing, because I do not want to get excited about this and then have it all come crashing down. And I don't want to tell everybody about it and then have to be like, "Oh, just kidding. They picked someone else." So like 3 days before Christmas, I get this phone call and it's, I think it's a 212 number. So it's Washington, D.C. calling. And I answer the phone and it's the director for the Center of Mental Health Services for SAMHSA. And she's like totally awesome. And she's like, "We just want to interview you for this event we're having in January." And so she asked me some questions and I tell her my story, because the event is for the Affordable Health Care Act and how it's helping people in recovery. And I had just done this awesome project on healthcare, and that's how they heard about it. So at the end of the phone call, she's like, "Well, I think I feel comfortable bringing you out here. Are you available, January 22nd to come speak at the White House?"
Oh my God. Dude, that's like my dream of being called by Oprah.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Holy
right?
cow. So awesome.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm absolutely available January 22nd to come, share my story at the White House. And she's like, "All right, we'll be hearing from our travel agent." So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like calling my mom and I go tell Heather, my best friend, and everybody's just dying, right? But I don't want to make it public yet because I'm like, it's going to jinx it. So about 3 weeks before the event, like the travel arrangements are all made. And what do you know? I had to tell my professors I couldn't be there in class because I was going to Washington, D.C. to speak at the White House, which they were totally okay with.
No kidding. I would have quit it. So I'm going.
And they like showed it in class because they were streaming it live when I was speaking. So it was crazy. So here's the funny thing. My travel dates were January 21st through January 23rd. And on January 21st, 2015, and 6 years earlier, I was getting out of jail. So the exact same date, 6 years later, I'm going to the White House to go tell my story of recovery to the nation.
Dude, just absolutely unbelievable.
Right?
I'm just blown away.
It blew me away too.
Do you have this on
YouTube? My speech?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is on YouTube.
They televised this?
Yeah.
Dude, I have to have it.
Yeah. So go look up, like if you go on YouTube and you look up treatment, recovery, and ACA, it's like the first video that pops up. It's the White House, or it's an ONDCP video, which is the Office of National Drug Control Policy. So I walk into the White House and they sent us to the wrong room, which was hilarious. And this blonde lady, this like beautiful, tall, blonde woman comes running up to me and is like, you were on my plane from Chicago, and like sweeps me up and wants to chat with me. And I'm just like petrified, right? I'm absolutely terrified. Who is she? She's so pretty. Why is she being so nice to me? And I met like all these amazing advocates who are my age, who are working on the national recovery movement at a very high level. And I was introduced to so many, so I was talking to one of my friends and he's like, I had no idea there was a major leagues of recovery. And there's a major leagues of recovery. And I was introduced to this world when I spoke at the White House. And this beautiful, tall, blonde woman starts talking to me about collegiate recovery. And I had no idea what that was. And then I was upset that we didn't have one at the University of Utah, where I was currently a student. So I speak at the White House, I tell my story, and it goes phenomenally well. And I have never had such an outpouring of love and support. And I mean, and I think I even say in the video, I'm like, this is far and away the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And it was.
You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so endearing because it's the truth. It's like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me.
So yeah, I speak at the White House. I find out about collegiate recovery, and I'm armed to go back to Utah, and I'm going to start building my collegiate recovery program. So, and I did that for my last semester. I got faculty members on board, and I wrote a grant, and the grant was accepted, and I started building my program so that people in recovery in Utah who want to go back to school have a safe place for them to get peer counseling, clinical services. Hopefully at some point in time, they'll have scholarships, sober tailgating, sober events, just a safe place where people can go to kind of have a touchstone to call home. So it was like a week before graduation. This beautiful, tall, blonde lady calls me. Her name's Ivana. And she calls me and she's like chatting with me, and she's at MSW. She has her master's of social work also. And she's like, hey, do you have a job? And I said, no. She's like, well, do you want to come interview for a job out here in San Diego? And I said, absolutely. Of course I do. I graduated on Friday, and that Monday they flew me out to San Diego for a job interview, and it went fantastic. And they offered me a position. And a month later, I moved out to San Diego.
Unbelievable. Just, newcomers, expect a miracle. Do not leave 5 minutes before the miracle.
No.
Just shocking. Unbelievable.
Don't do it. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah. This stuff doesn't happen. This is out of control. And this had nothing to do with me. This was me showing up, helping the newcomer, giving rides, being of service, doing what was asked of me, suiting up and showing up, being in the right place at the right time. I mean, all those little things that they tell you at the beginning when you're first sober and you think they're crazy and these old timers don't know what they're talking about. I'm pretty sure this story is living proof of if you do all that stuff, great things will happen. And I don't know what that great thing is going to be for everybody, but mine is awesome, and I would never change it for anything in the world. Everything happened perfectly. I mean, even all that bad stuff that happened that I talked about earlier, it all happened for a reason. And I'm a firm believer, that our weaknesses will become strengths, because my weakness was drugs and alcohol, and now my strength is recovery. And I get to serve the recovery community both at home and on a national level in my position today. And that's what I do.
And that is amazing.
And that brings us up to today and my story.
Wow. I just feel like I got off this amazing roller coaster ride with you, Arielle, and I'm just blown away. And you tell it in such a way where there isn't a lot of drama into it, even though your whole life is riddled with drama. But you tell this story that just leads you right up to the miracles that happen in recovery if you work the program. Mm-hmm. Period. You have to work the program. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that amazing story.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Well, let's close up here because we could keep doing this for hours. So what I like to do is I like to focus the close of the podcast for the newcomers. What I want to do is I want to ask you 5 questions about your early recovery, and I want you to respond with inspiring and insightful answers you can share with our listeners. Are you ready?
Yes.
Perfect. So number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
What got in the way of me, like, even thinking that sober was a lifestyle, like, that I could even do that, was I just never got in trouble until I got thrown in jail. I thought I was above the law, and I thought nothing could touch me. I thought rules didn't apply.
Absolute denial. So, number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
I think treatment really played a lot into that. I think, those moments in jail when I had that first thought of maybe I have a problem. And then as I kind of explored that, learned that, yes, I do have a problem. That's kind of what did it. And it was in the exploration that I learned that I am an alcoholic and a drug addict. And it's not just with drugs and alcohol. It's with men. It's with shopping. It's with, I can be a workaholic. I can, whatever it is, I can do that. And then the obsession part, I can obsess over anything.
Oh, no question about it. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Don't let your work become your recovery or your sobriety. When I was working in treatment, it's really easy to be like, oh, I went to a meeting for work. I don't need to go to a meeting for myself. And having that line be clearly stated to me and then being able to act on it.
Yes. No, it's very, very true. And I've heard that before because it's an individual program. You have to work your program no matter what.
Absolutely. And I was so grateful that my sponsor, who was working in the field, said that to me. So I didn't have to figure it out.
For sure. And if you could give our listeners only one suggestion, what would it be?
That you never know what seeds you're planting when you're in early recovery. The seeds that I planted in early recovery, I didn't even know I was planting them, right? And then when I needed it, I had this abundance. And I didn't even know it was there. So all the rides I gave, all the times I was of service, all the women I sponsored, all that stuff. When I went to Washington, D.C. and for my internship, through relationships in recovery, I had someone to pick me up from the airport. I had meetings to go to with women. I already had a support network. And that was all from work I had done earlier that I didn't even know I was doing.
So I guess the suggestion would be do service.
Yeah. Yep. And never say no to a legitimate AA request.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Perfect. Great suggestions, Arielle. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida, oh.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.